Thank you for your kind introduction. Thank you for having me here. My talk today, as you can see, is about linguistic landscape and language diversity. This is a topic that has attracted a lot of attention nowadays, the linguistic landscape. But of course, we have to ask ourselves, what is linguistic landscape? And we can give a definition that the linguistic landscape regards the multiple forms of languages in our daily surroundings, the words and images displayed in public spaces. But still, you could wonder, and we did that in our book, what we published some years ago, what is the linguistic landscape really? Does it refer to language only or also to additional things which are present around us, such as images, sounds, buildings, clothes, or even people? And our answer to that question was that it is the attention to language in the environment, the words and the image displaced and exposed in public places, that is at the center of attention in the linguistic landscape. So this is about linguistic landscape, language, words, and images displayed in public spaces. But it's a lot wider. We can include a lot of things that go around this central concept. And that's why we need a kind of holistic model that we have recently proposed. We call this model the multilingual inequality in public spaces. And it consists of 5 stages, starting with the language policy processes that determine somehow what can be seen in the linguistic landscape. Then, of course, the sign making processes, the people that make the signs, that can be handwritten signs by an individual, it can be a professional company. And they lead to an unequal display of languages on the signage in public spaces. That is what we see around us. But of course, it depends very much. We don't see everything all the time. We don't pay attention to all the signs. And also the signs influence us. Many advertisements want us to pay attention to the product and want us to buy it. Other signs are directing us in a certain direction. So this is our holistic model that we think we should include in a linguistic landscape study. And what we have seen over the years, when we started around this like some 15 years ago, that a number of studies over the years has grown enormously. Backhaus made an inventory in 2007. He found 30 studies, and we have an online bibliography of linguistic landscape, and we have over 1,100, and this is maintained by Troyer in the US, and you can see there's an awful lot of studies nowadays. So let's take a look at linguistic landscape studies in something that is of interest to LISTIAC and at our school context. As David Malinowski has said, he says why the linguistic landscape might be particularly well suited for language study and how teaching and learning in and with the linguistic landscape might best take place. And he gives some suggestions for that. And we have ourselves also said that the linguistic landscape in an educational context provides a promising way to teach about languages, multilingualism, language awareness, and literacy practices. So you can use it on the one hand, you could say, as a kind of pedagogical tool to teach with through the linguistic landscape. And on the other hand, of course, you can look also at the linguistic landscape in a school, all the signs that you can see in a school. So on the one hand, you have a pedagogical tool, on the other hand, you have schoolscape. But actually, it's more like a continuum. It's not absolute because, of course, you can use the schoolscape as a pedagogical tool, and you can also look at the surroundings of the school, etc. But this is what happened in a project some years ago in Montreal and Vancouver, where they had primary school children that were discovering the city. They sent them out into the street with disposable cameras to take pictures of their own surroundings. And students learned to see their cities as dense with signs that must be deciphered, read, interpreted. So they learned that. In a follow-up project in Portugal, Clemente and her colleagues in Aveiro, they also used primary school children, and they were looking at all the different languages, the language diversity in the signs. And they found that through this program, they were developing positive attitudes towards linguistic and cultural diversity. And they taught them 8 lessons for these children so they could improve their ability to read the signs, to decipher the signs in different languages, and to appreciate the signage much more. Another example was by Lasdina and Martin, who were working not with primary school children, but with university students in Latvia. And they found that the linguistic landscape is an easy and enjoyable way of involving students into fieldwork. So they used the students also to help them with the fieldwork to collect data. And they increased the awareness of multilingualism and a better understanding of hierarchies of language use and prestige in that way of the students. Sayer, in a study in Mexico, in Oaxaca, he used also the students as language investigators, but in the classes of English. And they discovered the purposes, the intended audiences, and the different meanings of English on science in what was for the rest a very Spanish environment. Another example is Chun and Dooley, who used it as an English literacy walk in Taipei, in Taiwan, where you also have English, of course, in some science, but they observed that otherwise the students might not attend to those science, or they might not use their potential for learning. So it has to be embedded in a course in order to be useful for the students. Another example is the use of Mandarin in Philadelphia, in Chinatown. And Leung and Wu, they used it there as a way, pedagogical resource to teach about pragmatics, about different language forms, about vocabulary, about idiomatic expression, grammatical features, etc. So they used it there in a more linguistic sense. So that's another way to use the linguistic landscape as a tool. But we also could look, as I said in the beginning, at the linguistic landscape as schoolscapes. And it was Tara Brown who used it or introduced it for the Furo language in Latvia, where she looked at the schoolscapes of the schools there, and she found that they basically have two functions. On the one hand, the signage in the school is enriching the natural culture, and on the other hand, the signs are also used as an historical artifact to show certain things of the history of the language and to make the children aware of it. We also see a bit another effect in a German English school in Alberta in Canada. You would expect that there was a lot of bilingual German-English signage, but what actually happened in that school is the linguistic landscape of the school, it favored English, and it did not contribute to the promotion of a bilingual Spanish-German program in that school. So that can also happen with this linguistic landscape. We also have a study by Pakarinen and Björklund on the schoolscape of a Swedish immersion primary school. And what they found also was that it was characterized by a dominance of Finnish and Swedish, and they were lacking the other languages. And for them, that reflects, because they were children of different languages, and it reflects the non-use of the third or the fourth languages of those students. And also in the PhD study of Pakarinen, we find an interesting example of how we can study schoolscapes, because she compared two Swedish immersion schools in Finland with two Irish immersion schools in Ireland. And she took almost 2,000 pictures of the linguistic landscapes of these schools. She took also 12 interviews. And what she found was language separation between the different languages. And you see in the picture, nicely colorful, the floor plans of the schools, of two of the schools that she studied. And the colors represent the languages. So the Finnish is the blue, and the green is the Irish, and you see that the other languages have a much smaller place, and especially the additional languages have a small space, but it's very nicely presented through these floor plans. So this is a bit the way that you can use it as a schoolscape and as a tool. And now I want to present some of our own studies that we did in this direction. And we started early on with a study of what we call second language acquisition, how the linguistic landscape can be meaningful for learning languages. And we wanted to see how the meaning of the linguistic landscape is constructed by using different modalities. Because we see that linguistic landscape can be a kind of an authentic input for second language pragmatic development. And it can also have material for raising language awareness and awareness about linguistic diversity. And so we had the example of a vending machine at the beach where we send a beverage, and we have the brand name, and we can wonder if that is still English. We have something in Basque called Egari al Sara. We have something in Spanish, Tienes sed, which means are you thirsty? And what we can see here that you have authentic input for instance, a language learner that gets some Basque and gets the translation, but it's also pragmatic competent because this is a kind of invitation to buy a drink. At the same time, we see the dimension of multimodality because we have red, we have different colors, we have different fonts. So there is a lot going on in one picture like this. This was our first study, but we continued with a study into the functions of multilingual schoolscapes. So we did a study in 7 primary schools in the Basque Country, where we studied also the schoolscapes, and we distinguished 9 different functions for the signs that are used in the linguistic landscape of the schools. So the teaching of the language, because it has some examples of that, or classroom management, what you're allowed to do and not to do, the school management, where you park your bike, etc. But important here in this context of LISTIAC is also development of intercultural awareness. So we found things like the flags of different countries where the children were from. They were said welcome, bienvenue, Bini Alvenut for different languages. So they were developing intercultural awareness through the use of different languages on the walls of the schools. So this is another example of a study that we did where we see that linguistic diversity is an important element. And then we went on with this, and we wanted to apply this concept of translanguaging to the linguistic landscape, because we wanted to link these new trends in translanguaging to the study of linguistic landscape. And we used, among others, in this study, we used this example of one panel next to the bookstore that we were studying, and the bookstore was our linguistic landscape, so to speak. And what we see here is a meshing of 4 different languages just in this one panel, because what we see is some elements are bilingual in Basque and Spanish, but some elements are in Basque only. Other elements are cognates, like Africa, Europa, so they are Asia, they are similar in the different languages. And then we have something English, Francais, because the bookstore that we are looking at is selling also travel guides and learning materials in these languages. The interesting thing is that you can see it in different ways, because when you take a bit more of a distance and you look at the bookstore as a whole, then we see on the top there, we see 2 old plaques that have been there a long time already, because what they say is that in the year 1832 was born in this house His Excellency Sir Fermin La Sala, 1917. And in 1853 was born in this house, that's a coincidence, of course, in the same house, but Excellency Sir Fermin Calbeton. And this is a plaque that's commemorating these 2 guys, because they were important people for the city of San Sebastian, where this is found. Because for them in that time there was Basque around, so probably they spoke Basque. It was in 1863, so the Basque was still a playground language, although these guys were from an important family. And the interesting thing is, if we look at these 2 persons, they were both quite important in Spanish history. They were members of parliament, they were ministers, they were one was a professor in Cuba, the other was an ambassador in Paris and in London. So what we see here is these 2 people, these 2 persons, these 2 guys have contributed to the spread of Spanish, because they were part of the colonialism of Spain at the time in the 19th century. And there was a kind of globalization before globalization going on. But my argument is here that just from looking at one specific house in one city, in our city, San Sebastian, you can get to things like globalization around the world. And that is an interesting thing, of course, of linguistic landscape studies. Then a third example of a study we did is about translanguaging also, but this was applying this translanguaging idea in one school, and in one primary school in the Basque Country. And we distinguished here between pedagogical translanguaging, which is designed, which is on purpose, where you design certain activities that you use translanguaging, and spontaneous translanguaging, the mixing, the going between languages. So our goals of this project were to allow for multilingual practices, to use the different languages, and also to break through the language separation in the classroom. And we enhanced awareness about languages, and we tried to increase the metalinguistic awareness, and we emphasized reading and writing skills. Our students that we had there, we had 3 experimental groups, and the target groups were in grade 5 and 6. So, and we had 2 control groups. The average age was almost 11 years old, and they 1/3 of them spoke Basque at home, half of them Spanish at home, and about a quarter had both languages at home. So these are the characteristics of the students. And what we saw inside the school was that we had, on the one hand, Basque announcements or panels or plaques or signs, and on the other hand, we had Spanish. So we had their languages next to each other. And what we did in our learning materials, We had 6 modules for 4 weeks each, 2 for each language class, and we had the languages side by side, as you can see in the picture, or alternating between the languages. So Basque, Spanish, and English were the languages of education, and they were in the learning materials, which was breaking through the language borders. And one of the modules had a linguistic landscape in it, and I'm going to look at that now. So what we did there is making use of the linguistic landscape of the town, and the children had to answer certain questions about the signs that we were presenting in the learning material. So how many languages are there? There are 2. Which languages? Spanish and Basque. What is the order? Or say the same in all languages. Can you divide the word pelicuria into different parts? Can you also divide the word iapandegia in different parts, etc. So, and then in English, so we had the 3 languages in the same exercise using the linguistic landscape. And so we gave them the assignment to do the same, because this was an example, to do the same for them and to analyze these signs in these different pictures and to evaluate those pictures as well at the same time. And then we also did some sessions about cognates, derivatives, and compounds that can be found in the different signs. And then we were asking them things like, in Spanish it's hospital, in Basque it's hospitalea, and how do you say it in English? So you have to and what are cognates, and how do you say the same in English? So these were teaching materials using the linguistic landscape. And we went one step further, and then we asked them to bring pictures to the school. So they had to take their own pictures and then to do a short analysis of these pictures. So we asked them certain questions for where did you take the photo, how many languages are there, and those kind of questions were asked of these children. So I can show you some results. Do you look at the linguistic landscape at all? We asked them beforehand, and then 68% said yes. Sometimes it depends. 26% said and 4% said no. And we asked them also why were the signs created, and that's interesting. They said 1/4 to give information, to give directions, a combination of the 2, and some said other. And then they answered things like to know what they sell or to know what is in each shop. So those answers were given by these children. We also had these exercises, as I showed you, and it's interesting to see that for the derivatives, they did 7 pictures and they had a mean score of 6.6. That was quite good. But the compounds, 3 pictures only, and also 6.7 out of 10. It's not that great because it was not that easy, in the sense that we saw that among the 5th and 6th graders, it was especially the 6th graders that did better. We also asked them about the linguistic landscape module, some self-evaluation, and student A said, I learned lots of new words. I didn't know what linguistic landscape was. Another said, in almost all of them, in the signs, you have 2 languages and you can learn words that say the same. And the signs in 3 languages in our village, another one said. And another one learned how to divide words and to study the cognates. So that was quite interesting that they did these things. Then we also, then that's the last example I'm going to give. We had some master students that are in our Master of Multilingualism in Education, and they were doing this assignment to find signs in the linguistic landscape. And then they had collected some signs, and then one of the students said, was it all in English? Was really surprised how much English he found in this city, because it never paid attention to it. But we can hear the voice of one of the students and her experience, Anna, and Anna has given me permission to show this video. But she is telling us about how it went in the linguistic landscape assignment that she did.
Hi, we are Bravan, Ain, Lydia and Alvaro, and we are going to present you the research we have carried out. We hope you like it.
Hi everyone. Well, first of all, I would like to share that I really enjoyed this research. I've never paid attention to my linguistic landscape, but right now I'm a little bit obsessed, and I'm like trying to read what's surrounding me, even if I'm in the bus or in the school, in the library. So I think that it really helped me to make a nice reflection. So first of all, the thing that really surprised me was that I found German in Aspeti. I was sure that I was going to find Basque, Spanish, English, maybe French, but when I found a sticker in German, I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing. Then I took a lot of pictures. I took like almost 100 pictures, and I was thinking that it would be like the quantity would be much smaller. One of the conclusions that I came up with was that Basque presence is huge.
Okay, the conclusion that we draw from all these studies is that languages on display in public spaces can be an important source for language learning and teaching, as well as being a useful tool for raising language awareness. We have published a recent article on that where we use different examples also now from a market where there were different signs displayed, and then sometimes you find very contrasting signs that you find the strawberries with the lemons. Conclusions. I think that I can say that our findings are in line with studies reported in recent added collections about language teaching in the linguistic landscape. We have here 3 books that have been recently published. Some lessons that we have learned are that you can reflect on school policies with the linguistic landscape and the school scapes, because sometimes you find that it is not reflecting the policy of the school. It can enhance meta-linguistic awareness. When you do exercises with the languages in the signs, the students become more aware of the linguistic aspects of languages. It also supports knowledge about languages, how languages function in society, hierarchies, ideologies, identities, those things. It makes students more linguistically sensitive, and I think that's in the context of this project especially important, that students become more linguistically sensitive, whether they're teachers in training or students, that doesn't matter. You can use it in all kinds of contexts. And what we have noticed is that students, after they have done these exercises, they walk the streets in a different way. And I can also confirm that from my own experience. Okay, some final words. I think that taken together, it demonstrates that linguistic landscape as a learning environment has really, really great potential. And it can be a source for second language acquisition or third language or whatever language, but next language, multiple languages. It does enhance awareness about language diversity, about learners and teaching professionals. That is also obvious when you use it in that way. And it is also very useful for critical reflection among academic researchers. So, taken together, this is, I think, my take-home message that linguistic landscape is really, really important for and really useful for learning environments to be used in different ways. Tegen dank. Thank you, Eskerikasko.